All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. This is a message for YouTube. So this is a debate between myself and Richard Spencer, and it's going to follow all the YouTube guidelines and protocol. So everybody in the chat room, please remain respectful. If you see if there are any trolls, just ignore them. No profanity, no craziness, please. Anybody who threatens anyone or uses profanity or whatever will be kicked out of the chat room. This debate is going to follow YouTube guidelines. And without further ado, I want to thank you, Richard, for agreeing to the debate.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
I want to start off really quickly. This is from the Library of Congress, and I'm just going to read you this really, really quickly. And I'm going to read you something from Thomas Jefferson's Monticello site, but this is from the Library of Congress, the Boston Massacre. Late in the afternoon of March 5th, 1770, British sentries guarding the Boston Customs House shot into a crowd of civilians, killing 3 men and injuring 8, 2 of them mortally. Surrounded by jeering Bostonians slinging hard-packed snowballs, the small group of soldiers lost control when one of their number was attacked. The soldiers fired despite explicit orders to the contrary. African-American sailor Crispus Attucks was the first to fall. The only victim of the Boston Massacre whose name became widely known, Crispus Attucks, was memorialized as the first hero of the American Revolution. This is the Library of Congress. So the first person to exhibit heroism, the first person to die in the American Revolution was a black man, Crispus Attucks. And I'm just going to read you really quickly. This is from the Monticello site. Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings. Thomas Jefferson fell in love with an enslaved black woman, and he had, based on DNA evidence, he fell in love with Sally Hemings. This is well known, and they were in love with each other. And Thomas Jefferson was the father of the 6 children of Sally Hemings mentioned in Jefferson's record, including Beverly, Harriet, Madison, and Eston Hemings. So the first man killed in the war for independence from the British was a black man, and one of the founding fathers had children with a black woman and fell in love with a black woman. So from these two historical facts, how does one justify well, I'll let you give your
I don't see
thoughts,
what your point is, actually, really. I mean, what is your point? So what? Crispus Attucks is a man who was shot by a British soldier. I've certainly heard of him before. I just quickly took a glance at Wikipedia. I think he's partially of Native American descent and African descent. So what? In terms of the Sally Hemings case, that is actually far more dubious than you are depicting it. I think you're more or less depicting what was a TV miniseries. I remember when I was in high school about this, love affair. There's actually, I mean, the DNA evidence is actually quite dubious. It's certainly not conclusive. And there's actually far more reason to believe that one of Jefferson's relations, who was certainly not the man Jefferson was in terms of his, intellect and demeanor and so on, is mostly. It just simply makes sense that he's most likely the father of those children. But even if it's true that Thomas Jefferson had children with a house slave, who cares? So what? Does that mean that identity doesn't exist? Does that mean
it doesn't mean identity doesn't
be nationalist? We can't be nationalist. I mean,
no.
I could make the argument that George Washington fought on behalf of the crown in the French and Indian War. So therefore, how could he conceivably rebel against King George? I mean, it just I don't see any logical connection between those facts and what I believe.
Well, the are you claiming that you would like a white nation based on American history?
That's an interesting question. So do you want me to talk about what my concept of the ethno state is?
Well, yeah. I mean,
Okay,
from what
because
I saw
it's
your
complicated.
debate with Sargon and
Hmm.
Andy Worski and Sticks, and you mentioned that this used to be a white nation, but you can look back at the history of the country, and it was never completely simply a white nation, and end of story.
No
You did
nation
have.
is no nation is ever 101% anything. The whole point really is who comprises the core, who really defines what the American nation was. And there's no question that it wasn't just simply whites who defined the American nation, it was actually Anglo-Saxon Protestants. John Jay thanked God that God had given America, that it was this new nation, it was a rebellious nation, it was in this wilderness and frontier, but God had granted the American nation a core character. And he was actually referring to Anglo-Saxon Protestants, not just white Christians. The first Immigration Act, it was a Naturalization Act of 1790. Again, it was for a nation that there was a people in a frontier in a wilderness. It was a very different situation than we are in now, and it was a racially based act. Again, this is the first time that question of who are we was answered by American politicians,
Yeah,
and it
but
was answered
nobody's.
as
But
white.
I'm.
To
But I'm
live here,
not.
you had to be white to become a
But I'm.
citizen.
But I'm not. I'm not debating that there was racism involved with the founding of the country. What I'm saying is,
Okay.
when you say "so what," the heroism of a black man who is the first person to die against the British can't be mitigated and it can't be erased, and it can't be mitigated, and it's a very important part of the history of the country. The fact that a black man,
I'm not
the fact that
questioning that. I mean, I would be a little bit revisionist, to be honest, about this fairly new claim about Jefferson and Sally Hemings, just because these are facts. Many people dispute these
no, but
facts.
I mean
This
the first point I made though was Crispus Attucks.
Crispus Attucks, sure, great. I'm
So
not denying
in
his
a
heroism.
in a let's say, for example, 100 years from now, you start a movement, and
Mhm.
um, and we'll get to that, in a little bit. But your movement starts from you, your vision, your ideology. Would school children learn that the first man to fight for independence and actually die was a black man?
Uh, sure. I mean, if it actually is true,
Well, it is.
again,
It is
I don't
true.
think that.
Crispus Attucks, this is true.
Okay. I'll look. I haven't looked into it myself, so I'll just take it. Sure, but again, I think we might focus on people who were absolutely essential to the founding of the United States and the Revolution, and those were not black people. I think Crispus Attucks. Again, I will go read up on him. I just took a quick. I had heard that name before I took a quick glance on Wikipedia. He seems fine, but the fact that he's black and this individual himself seem utterly dispensable to the revolution. Do you think the revolution would not have occurred if Crispus Attucks had not been the first one shot by a British soldier?
No, but I think it's very important to make the distinction that when you're trying to say that, um, let's have a white nation, and this history of this white nation is white, you have to remember also that it's not entirely white. The first man
I
to
agree.
die in defense of the nation against the British was a black man. So I
That is
think
a
that.
fascinating story. It's very interesting. The founding fathers wanted a white nation. And I don't think the founding fathers were white nationalist, as that term is come down to us today. But there is, and I would also acknowledge that the founding fathers in seeking justification for this revolutionary new state, They actually called upon many Enlightenment ideals that you could say are left wing in a way, or at least at the foundation of the left wing. I would grant you all those things, but the fact is, the founding fathers, without any question, wanted a white nation. There was no real concept of African Americans having equal status to Anglo-Saxons on the continent. It's just simply a fact. When you look at their very first 1790 Immigration Naturalization Act, they clearly understood the United States as a white country. Throughout the 20th century, even when these things weren't made explicit, and I think they should have been made explicit. Everyone in the country understood what an American citizen really was. Now, there was always these two issues, and they're different ones. The first was the Indian question, the Native American question, and the second one was the Negro question. And those were very difficult issues. They did give the United States a different character, you could say. But in terms of
in terms of
would dominate the culture, it was never a question. And also in terms of, real quick, and I'll let you talk, in terms of the 1924 Immigration Act, the paradigm of the 1924 Immigration Act was race, period, end of statement. It was also a restrictionist act. It basically, American population had swelled, it was, and so on. But in terms of new people coming in, it was an attempt to match the 1890 census. So this has been the dominant paradigm. It's only really after 1965 that we began to think of immigration and also who we are as a nation as, it's we're no one. America is just a platform for the world. If you come here and you want to do business or whatever, you're an American. If you believe in the Constitution, you're an American. The fact is that is a pretty foreign concept.
Okay, but
the vast majority of Americans throughout history.
But here's where I have a big issue with your viewpoint. You start off, the basis of your viewpoint is, going into the minds of the founding fathers and saying, well, this is what they wanted. With Sally Hemings, for example, Thomas Jefferson fell in love with a black woman. You cannot deny that he wanted that relationship.
I can deny that. That is really historically dubious. But even
no, wait a second. Let me finish. Okay, so he had a relationship with a black woman. If you want to go ahead and talk about what the founding fathers wanted, and pertaining to race, well, let's go ahead and do that. Not only was there a sexual relationship between Thomas Jefferson and a black woman, and it's been recorded that there was a love affair there. From 1619 to 1865, there was slavery and blacks were enslaved. The economic engine of this country, without slavery, you would not have America as a power in the 1800s. Without slavery, you would agree with that, correct?
More or less. I think the
so hold on, let me just finish my point. Let me just finish my point. If we're both in agreement,
I'll grant you that point to hear what you have to say after.
Okay, so if you don't have, King Cotton was the economic engine of the South, and that's one of the big reasons the United States of America was a power in the 1800s. When you remove that factor from 1619. Long before the country was founded, to 1865, you have black babies ripped apart from their mothers, sold in front of their mothers. You have husbands and wives ripped apart, families ripped apart, black families, African-American families ripped apart during slavery. The founding fathers also wanted slaves as an economic growth engine. The country benefited off this arrangement. It became a power because of 200 years of slavery. And without that, you would not have the United States as a superpower. And you also wouldn't have had the ability to go into the 20th century as a power. But that's a whole other story. But you're going into the minds of the founding fathers saying, yes, they wanted a white nation, but you're ignoring the biggest issues like slavery, like the fact that blacks have fought in every war we've ever had, like the fact that American history is not neatly defined in terms of pure white race, and that's it. There's Native American, there's Latino, there's Asian. Yes, you can cite the Chinese Exclusion Act, but you also have to understand, you also have to credit Chinese Americans for building the railroads and their achievements. So what I'm saying to you is simply going into the minds of the founding fathers and saying, well, they wanted a white nation. Yeah, they wanted a lot of things. They also fell in love with black women, and they also enslaved black families for economic growth.
Okay. I am not going into the minds of the founding fathers through telepathy or psychoanalysis. I'm actually looking at what they explicitly said. Again, this is just clear. This is not my interpretation. This is what they explicitly said. I would agree. There's no question that the America as a powerful nation in the 19th century was based on slavery. In this sense, without slavery, if we had made a radically different choice at some point, America would certainly be it would have a very different history. No question, if not a single Negro were brought to the continent, we would have had a very different history. But the real thing you have to think about is who is essential in this case. The fact, I believe America would have had, if, say, there are not a single Negro slave or a member of that race had been brought to the continent, yes, American history would be wildly different. It would probably be a lot better. All those terrible tragedies that you mentioned about children being ripped away from their mothers would not have occurred. And I think that would have been a much better thing. But America still would have been a superpower at some point. It would have had a different history. Because the essential component is not blacks.
But my
the
point
essential
is,
component is whites. Whites made America as a juggernaut.
but whites could not have made America without enslaving black people
it would have been different. I will obviously grant you that. But there are plenty of other examples of nations becoming extremely powerful without the benefit of slavery. Again, slavery was something that existed in a point of time. It is not some essential factor for what the United States is today. You could just as easily argue, perhaps with justification, that America would be more powerful if it had never engaged in the slave practice over the long term.
Do you think that America would be more powerful were it not? I mean, how is that even possible? You have 200. You have labor from 1619 to over 200 years of free labor. The economic output of which, I mean, we can go into, but without that free labor, without the millions and millions, so you can't just suddenly create millions and millions of white people to do what enslaved black people were doing for free. And so without that economic engine, there's simply no way America would be.
Slavery was was collapsing over the course of the 19th century. I am granting you this fact that the America had, particularly the American South, but it had a real slave economy throughout the 18th and 19th centuries. This made it powerful. Certain people benefited from it more than others. And also, I would agree with you that slavery, although it was benign in many in perhaps ways that we don't want to acknowledge, that it was a terrible institution that I don't want to repeat at all. All I'm saying is who is the essential factor in this? Whites are the essential factor in this. I mean, if you look at places where, say, freed African slaves, say Africans who overthrew their masters, in the example of Haiti, Haiti has been a disaster of a country over the centuries. Not entirely Haitians' fault. I wouldn't say that. But the fact is, we have seen what African countries look like. You can find plenty of examples of white countries that did not engage in slavery who became juggernauts.
Yeah, but
There were not African slaves in Germany, and Germany began to challenge England.
Yeah, but
by the mid to late 19th century.
But there wasn't a genocide in Belgium because of black Africans, but there was a genocide in the Congo because of white people and because of King
I
Leopold.
agree.
So
Bad things.
But
Whites
when
have
you
done
say
bad
when you say, well, look at, you know, countries run by black people, there's again, you're ignoring history, the history of
I'm not ignoring
colonialism,
history in the
imperialism, all these
slightest
things.
bit. I'm not ignoring history in the slightest bit. I've actually granted you most of your historical points. One of the major things that made America what it was in the 19th century was the slave trade. It made it powerful, and certainly some people benefited from that more than any other. All I'm saying is, I would say two things. On the whole, I think Negro slavery has been a terrible thing for the United States. It's a short term, and many people who oppose slavery, not the fanatical abolitionists who are kind of like SJWs of their age, but many Republicans, many people oppose slavery for this very reason. They thought that whites and blacks are fundamentally different. Included among those Republicans, by the way, was Abraham Lincoln. If you look at the Lincoln-Douglas debates, again, whatever you want to say about Lincoln, I'm ambivalent actually about him. But if you look at what he explicitly said, not what I'm reading into him, he explicitly said that whites and blacks are different, and that when they are put in the same political order, it is only going to result in a superiority and inferiority. In some place like Haiti, we actually had a situation where blacks achieved superiority over whites. It was awful and bloody, and it was actually entirely.
Yeah, but you keep bringing up Haiti. I mean, an example. I mean, we've had military incursions.
Can I just finish this and then we'll go to Haiti, I promise. So, but also, Abraham Lincoln did see the problem with slavery. He saw it from a racially informed perspective. And he was one of the major figures in the recolonization movement that is effectively a back to Africa movement. He was meeting with black leaders in the White House to discuss with them a back to Africa plan. If he had not been assassinated, who knows how history actually might have.
Yeah, but why would you? But why would that be? How could you tell people who have been here first, who've been here from day one, even before day one, whether it's black citizens, Native Americans were here before anyone from Europe, Latinos, Asian Americans? Why would anyone want to leave if this is their home?
Well, you know, I don't know what to say. Like what happened over the course of the 18th and 19th century, when you had this move west across the continent. The sovereignty of the United States followed the movement of white people. As white people advanced it, even into some places like in the Southwest, that were under hegemonic dominion of Hispanic, in a different sense of that word, rule and so on. The United States was spreading as white people spread. It was a white country. Indians or Native Americans have had a very difficult relationship with whites, and they're not really citizens in the way that whites and blacks actually.
But that's an inaccurate statement, Richard. It's inaccurate to say that manifest destiny proves that this is a white nation, because you have 500 broken treaties with Native Americans. You have a Mexican-American war, where you have California, Nevada, Arizona, Utah belong to Mexico. You still have in the history that you're talking about, which is, some people in the chat room might not understand where I'm coming from, and I don't know why. Which, if they oppose your ideology, it kind of boggles my mind how they don't understand where I'm coming from. My whole point in bringing up, and I understand that you've conceded, many of my points that I made, but if you've conceded the points that I've made, and yes, you are right when you talk about what what white people of European descent wanted, or what they believed to be correct. But U.S. history is, you cannot divorce U.S. history or remove the fact that it's not simply white. There are people of Native Americans, Black, Asians, Latinos who have contributed to the white history that you're talking about. I guess we've kind of, you've agreed with me on that point, but I guess
we won. I mean, I don't know what to say. Like, there are many bad things that white people did across the centuries to Native peoples, to Africans, etc. But the fact is, we won. It seems like the argument you're making is that, and we're losing now. I would actually say that in terms of what is going to define the United States. In terms of the argument, you seem to be making this argument, to the degree to which I understand you, which is that white people did some bad things. I'll concede you that, sure, and that within the rich fabric of American history, other races have been a part of it and contributed to it. Yes, I agree. But none of that means that identity doesn't exist. And none of that actually contradicts my fundamental point, which is that the white race and Anglo-Saxon Protestants in particular were the essential people. They were the indispensable people in defining the United States. The United States is only what it is or was because it was a white country that had an Anglo-Protestant core.
Well, I mean, but
all of these people you mentioned are dispensable.
I don't think that 200 years of slavery. I don't think that 500 broken treaties with Native Americans. I don't think that the achievements and the contribution of everybody from Asian Americans to Native Americans to Black Americans to Latinos, I don't think that can simply be disregarded. For example, I'll just read you this, and I guess we'll get into the modern era.
Mm-hmm.
Medal of Honor recipient jumps on grenade to save Marines in Vietnam. James Anderson Jr. was born in Los Angeles, California, January 1947. He went to a local junior high for a year and a half, and he decided that his real calling was the Marine Corps. Within a year of enlisting, the private first class was sent to Vietnam on February 28, 1967. Anderson had just celebrated his 20th birthday and his one-year anniversary in the Marines when he was put to the ultimate test. He goes on to talk about Anderson was serving as a rifleman in Company F, 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marine Regiment, 3rd Marine Division in Quang Tri Province of Vietnam's Central Coast. He and his platoon were on a mission to rescue a heavily besieged reconnaissance patrol when they came upon heavy fire in the dense jungle northwest of Cam Lo. The platoon reacted quickly and began firing back. Anderson found himself on the ground in a tightly packed group of Marines within about 20 meters of the enemy firing back on them. All of a sudden, a grenade landed within feet of Anderson's head. Without hesitation, Anderson grabbed the grenade, pulled it in his chest, and wrapped himself around it before it detonated. Anderson's body absorbed the blast. He was immediately killed thanks to his actions, though the Marines around him survived with just minor injuries. Most of us would never be able to understand the selflessness and self-sacrifice. Anderson's extraordinary valor and the giving of his life to save the men around him can't be overstated, and that's why he received the Medal of Honor posthumously October 21st, 1968. His parents accepted it for him. He was a Black man, one of the many African Americans who have won the Medal of Honor, and he was a Marine. So
look, I honor him. I had never heard that story before.
But
that is a fascinating anecdote. But none of
but this is my point.
Literally an anecdote.
I didn't read it as an anecdote. I read it as the ultimate refutation of your ideology, which is that it's not you're saying, well, look, without white people,
an example, If I
No,
go
what,
dig
hold
up
on.
an historical example of a white man fighting on behalf of the Japanese Empire in the Second World War, and I'm sure I could, there's got to be one. Does
Well, no,
that
but this
mean
is
that
not. But
the
this is. But
Japanese
this is
nation is
not. But this
truly
is not a
white or
white man
which part
fighting
of
on
it?
behalf. But wait a second. This is not a white man fighting on behalf of the Japanese. This is a Marine. This is an American. This is a man who was born in Los Angeles, an American citizen, a black man, just like Crispus Attucks, just like every black people who have fought, and in every war we've ever had. I don't know how historically and in terms of logic you remove the achievements and accomplishments of
I'm not
blacks,
removing their
Latinos,
achievements and
Asians.
accomplishments.
How do you remove that from
I'm not.
American history?
I'm not. I mean, look, this is structurally speaking, this is why I think we're kind of talking past one another right now. You are basically thinking about America purely in terms of citizenship. And have there been blacks or Latinos or Asians or transsexual lesbians from Singapore who have done some good stuff or fought in a war or something? Sure, I'm not denying that. But that is your line of argument. You're telling me
It's not my line of argument at
hold
all.
on, hold on. Well, what do you mean it's not your line of argument? That's what
It's
you've been
not. I'm
talking
not
about.
saying that. I'm not simply interjecting the fact that James Anderson jumped on a grenade as this, minor footnote to what you're saying. I'm saying that
Kind of are. But
this, huh?
you are. I mean,
No,
look,
I'm not.
no, let me finish what I was saying before.
Okay.
So you're basically talking about citizenship, and then you're also you're giving me, I mean, I know you don't want to hear this. You're giving me anecdotes, some of them more significant than others, some of them historically dubious, some of them not. I think the Jefferson anecdote is absolutely historically dubious. The Anderson heroism probably is not. And I honor that man for doing that. But you're talking about citizenship and then historical anecdotes, and you're basically saying, how could you show such dishonor to these people who sacrificed everything for their citizenship or what they thought the country was? What I am talking about is actually something different. It is nationality, it is identity, it is ideology, and it's also meaning in the sense of what is this country? What is it at its core and its root? And what I would also say is when we look at what is happening in the United States today, I actually think both of us would probably agree that on the whole, the United States is headed in a bad direction. There is a polarization that is extreme. There is a fragmentation that is getting very intense. We don't love one another. We don't all feel like we're on the same team. The United States is fragmenting, and it's fragmenting on the lines of race, and it's fragmenting on the lines of class to a degree, and it's within the white race, no question, and it's also fragmenting on the basis of identity. This is happening right now.
Well,
And so what I am saying is the things that I'm willing to talk about. Conservatives want to talk about citizenship and heroism and the Constitution, all this kind of disembodied stuff. What I am saying is that the bodied stuff, the stuff that's in our DNA, the stuff that's in how we our sensibilities and mentalities, the real human stuff. This is how the United States is breaking down. It's breaking down on that level. It's not breaking down on this other level. Do you think most African Americans are acting like Anderson? That they're like, we would sacrifice anything for our country? No, most African Americans don't think of themselves as part of the same nation.
Well, I disagree with you on that, but let me just
as you and I probably do. Actually.
Let me just no, but I disagree with you on that. I would actually say that most African Americans, most Latinos, most Asians, most everybody who lives in this country, I actually disagree with you in terms of the fragmentation. I think that you probably didn't know who I was. You never probably heard of me up until perhaps recently. The only and I say that only because the only reason I heard it, I know who you are is because of Slate, which is a very, very progressive, liberal publication. The only reason that I know about alt-right or white nationalism is not because of conservatives, it's because of the left. And I would say that that's a very vapid political maneuver and propaganda from the left, because they didn't talk about the alt-right during President Obama's tenure by design. They didn't talk about the alt-right because it wasn't politically expedient to do so. Once Trump came to power, suddenly they talked about neo-Nazis marching and all of this, when they marched all throughout Obama's tenure without the uproar. But let me just get real quick to, you mentioned a point. I guess let's try to fast forward.
I would say this. Yes, throughout my entire career, conservatives have not only actively.
I'm saying your biggest marketing. The biggest marketing tool you have is the left, not necessarily the right. Unfortunately, from my vantage point, unfortunately, because the left has publicized your movement in order to mask its own shortcomings.
There's no question that as I was saying, throughout my whole career, the conservative movement has, you could say, actively ignored or suppressed not just me and people like me, who are other people in this movement who use their face and name and speak forthrightly about what we believe. There's no question they've done that. They've actually denounced us on many occasions. There was an interesting moment between, say, the early mid 2015, early 2016, and up to this present day, in which so much of the news coverage we were getting was from the left. And sure, was this an attempt by them to say that? Look at these terrible people. I mean, if you want to find totally ridiculous people who support Trump or whatever, you can find people who are, to be honest, a lot more ridiculous than I am. I'll finish this. I'll grant you that there was this attempt. Oh yeah, we want to associate Trump with the alt-right and so on. Hillary Clinton denounced us in the summer of 2016, etc. But the fact is, they're not. I'm sure a lot of people who believed in the flat earth or something like that also supported Trump. I would say most of the people who believe in that thought Trump was an interesting thing. The fact is, the alt-right and the identitarian idea is getting at something real. One of the reasons why what I say is, you could say, titillating or fascinating, a guilty pleasure for liberals and leftists. And so many conservatives who want to denounce us, is because we're getting at something true. Now, I want my message out there, so I attempt to use the media in the sense that, yes, a lot of these people whom I've talked to over the years are ultimately liberals and don't want me to win and so on, but the media is that it is a medium, that it is a way to convey a message, and we have benefited much more than we have gotten. Then it's been a disadvantage by using the media in order to communicate. Despite the fact that the New York Times might want a multi-culti world in the future, if you can communicate through them and reach people, it is worth it. That has always been my strategy.
My point, though, that I disagree with you on.
But sometimes you have to change things as well, because there's with everything good, there's been a lot of bad too. It's an interesting thing. But again, I viewed the media as a medium. That is, it's a way of conveying a message, and it's an immensely powerful one.
But you made a point, and you said, well, the country is fracturing apart into different nationality or different identities, and you then made a statement that blacks or other ethnic groups don't see themselves as American or don't see themselves as unified. I would argue the opposite. I think that we are a unified nation. I think that Americans of all different ethnicities are very unified. You can see that people who well, just let me finish. You could see that from people who give their lives for the country, people intermarrying, people in everything from food to music, which I'm going to get to in a second. but
Intermarrying.
the media.
90% of marriages are intraracial. That is,
That's fine. That's fine. But
9 out of 10 people.
that's fine. But my point, my overall point
Hispanics will
is
root for Mexico when they play the United States.
that's fine.
In
But
the soccer World
my
Cup.
point.
African Americans are deeply
But
alienated
let me finish
from
my
white
point,
America, and
please.
I actually
Let-
understand why.
But let me finish my point.
Okay.
My point is that I believe that this country is more unified now than it ever was. I think that race.
Oh God.
I think that. Well, that's. Let me finish my point.
That's just ridiculous.
Well, it's not ridiculous at all. The media, whether it's your ascent or rise in popularity, which is tied directly to propaganda on the left, which you've agreed that is what you're taking advantage of also. When you talk about culture, American culture, let's just get into this. So in your world, and this is one of the reasons that the country is unified, would you say that rock and roll, for example, is white music?
Not exactly. There are certainly some origins of it that were coming from African Americans, but I would say that.
So let me just read you this. This is from.
That about all.
Well, hold on one second. This is from the University of Florida. Many people may not know the roots of rock and roll are woven deep with an eclectic assortment of musical genres. Blues, gospel, rhythm and blues, other forms of black music styles are the roots for rock and roll. So a huge factor for this was the large migration of blacks from south to the north throughout the 1940s. Music associated with blacks was originally called race music and was later called rhythm and blues. With many men participating in World War II, most big jazz bands were forced to break up. Okay, so anyway, my point, which is one of my major points from the very beginning of our discussion, from the Revolutionary War to the Founding Fathers, and who they fell in love with, to music, to the history of this country in every single way, is tied to African American culture. But you can also make correlations with Asian Americans and Latinos, Latino Americans, and every other ethnic group. I am not bringing that up as an anecdote or conjecture. What I'm saying is, if you want a white society in the future based on American history, it would be impossible to remove the contributions, achievements, the historical facts that people of different races, different ethnicities contributed greatly and are still contributing and are part of the fabric of the nation. So how can you talk about? How can you talk?
I don't know what to tell you. That this argument is absurd.
Yeah, how is it absurd?
I am sure. So
wait a second. How is it absurd?
There are aspects of African culture.
Well, hold on one second. How? Wait a second. You said it's absurd. So you're not going to listen to rock music in your society that's only white or white nation? You wouldn't listen to rock music.
This is not. Look. I ate Vietnamese food yesterday. So what? Vietnamese food is actually, interestingly, it's a very French cuisine. So much of what we call, Vietnamese food is actually derived from the colonial experience. What we're getting at is cultural appropriation, and that word has become like a slur word in the modern academia, where if a white person wears dreadlocks, he's considered evil and harming black people. I find that pretty ridiculous. Although if this kind of animus can prevent white people from wearing dreadlocks, I support the SJWs. But what you have to get at is that culture itself is about cultural appropriation. And what is most important is that genius, that thing that's doing the appropriating. You can find musical instruments like the guitar and so on have lots of non-white origins. But there was a certain white genius that took this raw material and turned it into something new. Japan has adopted almost everything.
But how is white
everything? Okay, hold on real quick. Japan has adopted it in terms of its language and alphabet and so much from the Chinese world. Yet there's a Japaneseness to it that really is distinct, because there actually is a Japanese collective genius, something that people share horizontally, that is within the culture at large, and vertically, that is between the future and the past, between their ancestors and their descendants. There is a genius to a people, and it's hard to define, sure, but it's there. And yes, there are many white people who took raw material from, say, Africans or Arabs or what have you. There are many Arabs who took raw material from whites and turned it into their own thing. I mean, the history of religion is like this. What became Christianity was a Jewish sect at one point. And but it became a deeply European ideal. Christianity in the world of other races becomes something fundamentally different. Voodoo is a kind of Catholicism that,
okay.
I mean, it's weird to say, but it became fundamentally different. It integrated the genius and the cultural baggage, you could say, of the culture that adopts it. This is how history and culture works. None of this means that identity doesn't exist. None of this means that the culture is not fragmenting.
But
none of this means that whites don't deserve their own country.
But this is the thing. Again, I am stating something that you agree with. Rock and roll is, you would probably say, American music, correct?
Sure.
Okay, so from the Revolutionary War to rock and roll, the fabric of the nation and the fabric of, well, the origins of rock and roll come from Africa. Rhythm and blues, jazz. I just read you from the University of Florida. Just the history of rock and roll is, the origins are from African music.
I've already.
How do you say that? How would you say that in terms of culture? Because culture is very important. Like, for example, a big part of the culture of many white people would be listening to
rap music,
Black Sabbath,
because there are wiggers, therefore identity
Black Sabbath or Motorhead. But if you talk, well, hold on one second. If you watch interviews of Lemmy from Motorhead or Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath, Little Richard was their hero. Little Richard was a gay black man, is a gay black man. So how do you separate these? You're talking about culture, and then you're ignoring cultural influences that are from.
I'm not ignoring them. I've explicitly stated that I am not ignoring them. You're just repeating your point after I have responded to it. You're just repeating yourself.
You're not ignoring. You're certainly not ignoring them, but you're not ignoring them. But my point is that you're mitigating them.
Perhaps. I mean, I could, sure, in the sense that, I mean, again, my point is about cultural appropriation. That is, there is raw material from other races or other cultures, and there is a genius to a people or a race that takes this raw material and transforms it. So, and even if it weren't the case, even if we all listen to rap music or something, so what? So what? What does that not mean that? Does that mean that identity doesn't exist?
But I'll explain.
Does that mean that whites aren't a real people? Does that mean that whites don't deserve their own country? Hell no.
But wait, but you're saying, okay, so let's get to, I guess, the nitty gritty.
Okay.
I've explained the history and the fabric of the nation, and you've either mitigated or acknowledged and then mitigated.
You've cherry-picked interesting anecdotes that I do not deny, with the exception of the Sally Hemings thing. That is historical.
Well, I wouldn't say 200 plus years of slavery is an interesting anecdote, but let's continue. I want to fast forward, because you would liken yourself to be a visionary, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so
I aspire to be a visionary.
Let's say we fast forward to 100 years from now. The alt-right wins because the left just eats itself up, and whatever. You would, through laws,
sounds great,
kick out everyone who isn't white from the United States of America?
I think that whites deserve our own country. That doesn't
In
mean
the
that we
United
won't
States?
trade. It might be in North America. The ethno state, as I've defined it, would most likely be a post American entity.
Would
But
it be in the
it could be
borders of the
anywhere. It
United
could be
States
in
of
Europe.
America?
Would you agree to it if it were in Europe? Like,
Well,
I'm
I
kind of
don't. Well,
curious.
I just want to know what you.
Do you deny, say, the Irish their right to find their own destiny?
The Irish have been living in Ireland for thousands and thousands of years. My question to you though is, do you want a white
I
state
don't
within the United?
deny Native Americans. I've actually said this quite explicitly. And some people have criticized for it. I have a certain romanticism about Native Americans or Indians. I think they should have a place in North
Well,
America.
my question,
I'm
my
not going to
question
fight
to you,
for it, but I would definitely
here's my
support it.
question, and if you could just, I guess, yes or no, do you want a white nation within the United States of America?
Within the United States of America. Okay.
Yeah.
Do I want a white nation within the United States of America? Yes. I mean, that exists today.
Would
I think
you would you kick out, for example, in the future, is your vision for the United States kicking out everybody who isn't white?
It's not necessarily my vision. I mean, in the sense that what I want is a homeland for white people. Now, that could take different forms. It could take a kind of smaller form that is an enclave for whites if the United States were to fragment or dissolve. It could be the grand vision that I have set forth of a real ethno state in which it would be a place for all white people from actually around the world. It would be a kind of Zionist. It would
But
be
in terms of
similar to a
geography,
Zionist entity.
in terms of geography, where do you know where you want?
Hope
So
it,
here's
hope
the
it would
question: Do you
okay.
know where you want it to be, or is it just could be anywhere?
It could be anywhere. I certainly would hope something like this would exist in North America. I love North America. There's aspects about the American experience, the wilderness, the beauty of it all. I'm not talking about the strip malls and the highways. I'm talking about just this amazing continent that we were blessed to ever experience. Yes, I hope we can hold on to this because we're the ones who are going to continue to make it beautiful. And actually losing a white, not only just a white majority, but really white control. That is white people setting the tone, white people making all of the important decisions that matter.
But okay,
if we lose that, this country is going to be an a terrible place to live.
So you want in North America, you're talking about Canada, the United States, Mexico. You say North America. Where do you want this? I mean, so you don't know, but likely you want it to be within the United States.
I have said that it could be anywhere, and it could even be on the moon. I have said this.
You want a white nation on the moon?
I just said could.
Okay.
I want a moon base. I mean, yeah, sure, sounds fun. But my point about saying this is a very important one, and it's twofold. Where we are right now in terms of our historical trajectory is that the United States as an entity and as a concept is fragmenting, and it is becoming less and less livable. It is racked by debt. It is racked by mutual suspicion. Just let me finish. And so I think that the trajectory of the United States is towards a bad place. I'll be perfectly honest. However, at the time being, most white people are generally pacified. There is either through the welfare state, either through getting rich and having a job, either through watching Netflix for half their life and so on, through this kind of passive nihilism. People who are really bearing the burden, a lot of lower class whites who are 100% part of our people. They're class divisions within the right ways. I'm sure I rub a lot of them the wrong way. But the fact is, they are still part of our people. They are bearing the brunt. The increase in suicides among whites, the increase in drug use, the increase in despondency of just losing a sense of themselves. Again, drugs, tattoos, sexual deviancy. It is increasing. It's actually turning death.
What do you have against tattoos?
I'm not a big fan of tattoos, to be honest. But I'm not gonna. It's not personal. Like,
All right, so
whatever.
so my
It's not a big deal.
but
But
what I'm
what I'm saying is that we are right now. We're at a state where a large portion of the white race is effectively pacified through a number of things, through just being content, if angsty, but content. A lot of people aren't pacified, and they are paying the price. And I have true sympathy for them.
so
But the
70% of this country is white. Are you speaking for? Hold on, just one second.
It's
Are you
probably lower than
speaking?
that, actually.
Are you speaking for
But
this?
let me just finish this point, and then I'll let you talk. So, but the fact is, we are not in a truly revolutionary, paradigmatic change situation right now. Right this instant, we are not there. The United States is not going to collapse. The United States is right now. The United States is not going to lose military hegemony or monetary hegemony, which is perhaps even more important. And so we aren't at that point, but we will be. It might be in a year from now. It might actually be in 50 years from now. It might be in 100 years from now. But that point will come. And when that point comes, and these points come in history, they come like a thief in the night. They come hyperbolically. They don't come linearly. That point will come when a change will be possible. And when that point comes, the leaders of the race have to have a concept of what we ultimately want. We can't just be scrambling. We can't.
All right,
just
but
be
I think
hoping
that
to survive.
I think
we need to say no. We're going to
the United
make
States
a
of
major
America,
turn, and
okay,
we're
but
going to have a new
if the United
type
States of America
country.
survived, if the United States of America survived the Civil War, we can survive, internet battles or identity politics battles.
It's not just internet
between
battles.
left and right. Okay, fine,
It's not
but
just that.
but
It's
but
much bigger.
This I think the issue of slavery and the Civil War and 700,000 Americans total dying in the Civil War, they upped it to 700,000. I think that's a much bigger issue that the country surpassed and survived than anything going on today.
Why did that war take place?
But
Why did that
well,
Civil War
hold
take
on.
place?
But here, let me get to my overall point. My point is this: because we need to get to a mutual understanding, which is predicated upon your viewpoint, which makes the left or makes people insane. I would like to know, for argument's sake.
I kind of agree, actually.
For argument's sake, which I disagree with, you want an enclave or the entire United States? I guess you want Congress all white instead of majority white, which is what it is now. So you want complete and utter control by white people, which is almost what it is now in the Congress and executive and Supreme Court.
I want a white elite to control our own destiny. Yes.
And so you don't think there's a white
white elite?
You don't think there's a white you don't think white elites are controlling the country now?
To a degree, they are now. There's some interesting components to that. There's a Jewish component, but putting that aside,
so Jews are not white.
Jews are not white. No,
okay.
Jews are not European. They don't understand themselves as European. They understand themselves as Jews.
Well, I have always considered myself white, but apparently, in your view, I'm not white.
Okay, you could find some Jews who will more or less understand themselves as white. Many Jews, particularly Ashkenazi Jews and Sephardic Jews, have white skin. But in terms of my point about the Jews, fundamentally, is that Jews have a different story to tell.
So you wouldn't. So hold on. So you wouldn't, because I want to in this discussion get to what you want. So then people can then oppose, if they want to oppose your ideology, they know what the hell they're opposing. Within the United States of America, the fact that Congress, the fact that all but one president that we've had have been white, the fact that you've had enslavement of black people for 200 plus years, you've had virtual annihilation of Native Americans throughout the country. You've had pretty much, in terms of the history of our nation, from Manifest Destiny to, every war we've had that we've won, or most wars except Vietnam, you've had dominance by a country that's still 70+% white.
It's not
So
70+% white. It's maybe 60+% white.
well, the latest statistics I saw today before our debate is 70+%, 72% actually. But
65 is
so
the
seven
last
so that
census.
so
And secondly, that
how
is a
much
little bit questionable actually in
so
terms of
how would
who is
you
counted as white.
in my view, you pretty much, the history of the country is pretty much dominated by white people already. Obviously, it's not enough domination from your vantage point. But
You're
how
kind of
would you
missing the
go?
point by just saying that. I'll let you ask another question. But
Well,
you're
hold
kind
on.
of missing my
My
point.
overall point is this. That was just like a sub.
Okay.
How do you implement your vision? And for argument's sake, well, just because you said North America and you picked kind of a broad geography, within the United States of America, how would you implement the expulsion of or removal of Black citizens, Latinos, Asians, Jews? How would you remove people who are citizens born here? You would then rip up the Constitution. You would kick people out in terms of mass waves, and if they didn't want to leave, you would then perhaps send them in concentration camps. Like, how does that happen in like 100 years from now, when you have this inception, this vision, and let's say the United States falls apart and you take a third of the country with the alt-right? Do you then expel and remove and force people out of your territory?
Okay, let me first go back before I answer those tricky questions about pragmatic issues. Let me go back a little bit. And you were saying, so the majority of Congress is white. So many people, heads of corporations are white, boards of corporations are white, et cetera. I never looked at Hillary Clinton as, my fellow white. Look, at last we've got a white one who's about to become a president. I certainly didn't look at George W. Bush that way. My career in journalism began in fierce opposition to the white man in office, who I thought was making terrible decisions, and I certainly have stand by that sentiment. The fact is, we need a different type of white person in charge. This, and I've said this actually in multiple speeches. Before there is a black question, before there's a Jewish question, before or a problem, before there's a Hispanic problem, there is a white problem. The problem is fundamentally with us, and those other problems are problems for us.
So if you fix the white
us.
problem, and you fix the leadership, and you're alive to see the day, and you head the state, and you are the head of a white nation within the United States, let's say it's the South, I don't know. Okay, so you're controlling the territory. Do you kick out Asians, Blacks, Latinos? Do you forcibly remove them? Yes or no?
I don't know, because we have not gotten there. Like, this
I
is
understand
not
that,
happening
but
tomorrow.
wait a second.
So
with all due respect,
this is what I would say.
But let's be honest. Wait a second. With all due respect, let's be honest. Of course, we haven't gotten there. All of your visions or theories are, theoretical. We haven't gotten there, but you do have a plan or a vision, and so it's a very simple question. You've obviously thought about what you want to do with people who aren't white. Do you want to kick them out? Do you want to kill them?
We don't know where we are going to be. White people might be kicked out of the United States. To be honest, it kind of looks like we're headed in that direction.
How could white people be kicked out? Who's going to kick out white people?
The amount of white animus is extreme. And if you look at where is that headed, yes, I could imagine that happening. Right. Just the other week in South Africa, where you have white people who are a small minority now, in a nation that they used to have control over, Congress has just voted to expropriate land from white farmers without compensation.
But we're not South African. You made a statement. We're not South Africa.
I'm saying this kind of thing can happen.
Okay,
I don't know where we're going to be in 100 years or something when something like this is possible.
Okay,
this is what I would say. This is what I would say. The survival of my people is non-negotiable.
I understand this. So my question.
No, I'm actually answering your question. At the end of the day,
what would you do? So then, what would you do with blacks?
There would be no limit to what if someone truly cares about his people and our shared culture and civilization, then there will be no limit of what
So
we
would
would
you
do
kill?
to
So would you kill?
survive.
So would you kill if you had to
I don't want
kill?
to. I absolutely do not condone violence. I do not want violence of any kind.
I
All I'm
understand, but you
saying,
said there's
if
no.
we are
But you said
truly under threat, if we are truly under threat, am I willing to fight? No question. There
okay.
is
So,
no
but
question in my
would
mind.
you be?
Every other
How do you define under
nationalist
threat?
in a situation like the white Boers are in, yeah, that seems to be under threat to me. No,
Well,
right
I'm
now,
talking about. I'm talking about.
whites are a kind of frog that's being boiled. To use this metaphor, where you put a frog in a pot and you slowly raise the temperature, and it doesn't know
But you're
what's
the.
happening until it's
But
dead.
in this. But
That's
in
what's
this.
happening.
But in this discussion, in this
At some
hypothetical.
point, it's going to boil.
But what I'm trying to say is I fast forwarded into the future. We're in the discussion now of you getting what you wanted. You are the head. You're still alive. You've taken white people to the promised land.
I
Okay,
just saw
so
this. Don't mess with Texas. White Texans were willing to go to war.
okay,
They were
hold on
willing
one
to
second.
kill
So
people
what I'm
for
what
a
I'm what I'm
political
saying
cause.
is, do you advocate? Because you haven't really
I
answered
don't
the
advocate
question.
violence, and I
Yeah.
do not advocate.
Okay, so but okay, so wait a second. If
I would
in a
love
white
for this to
nation,
happen
okay,
in
so
a peaceful way.
in a hypothetical white nation where you have black citizens, Jews, Latinos, Asians, Native Americans in your territory that will not leave, that will not move. You are the head of your, white nation, white nation state. You are the leader. These people who are not white will not move. Do you forcibly remove them with force and at gunpoint? Yes or no?
The survival and
Just
flourishing
yes.
of my
Wait,
people is
please.
non-negotiable.
Let's
I'm
be.
not going to
Let's just
answer a
be.
hypothetical question.
But
That's just
your
like,
entire
would you do this?
philosophy is hypothetical.
My entire philosophy is not hypothetical. That's simply wrong. I am willing to talk about the ethno-state. That is something for the future. What we need is that
something
goal.
for the future that doesn't exist now is a hypothetical.
I think you should ask, would you be willing to not kill someone in order to achieve a homeland for your people? Yes.
Would you
of
be
course.
willing to?
But I'm not going to answer that hypothetical question where it's this gotcha, where it's like, look, politics and history is messy. If you look at world history, it's a slaughter bench. American history is a slaughter bench. Sometimes wars will happen. Sometimes things get messy. A lot of times, whenever there's a paradigmatic political change, people die, and there are challenges for power. People who fight and are willing to be more ruthless and so on will win. That is the history of the world, and that is going to be the history of the world going forward. So that is a perfectly good answer to your question.
Well, it is an answer, but it doesn't address I don't think you're owning your philosophy.
Look, your identity is Americanism.
Well, wait a second. With all due respect, let's not focus on getting away from this issue, because
I thought. Well, hold on. Okay, because this is a debate. It's not necessarily. You're not a journalist who's.
I'm not trying.
Whenever I ask a journalist a question, they're like, "I ask the questions." But
no. It's not an interview. But see, the thing is, it is a debate.
Hold on, real quick. Your identity, to the extent that I understand it, is Americanist, and it is citizenist, you could say. So race might matter, but it's we're all Americans. That's the key thing. Would you fight? Would you actually even be willing to kill or willing to die to maintain that identity that you have? Just kind of hypothetically speaking.
Richard, you didn't answer my question, which was part of the debate.
I did.
No, it's no.
I am willing.
It's part of the debate. That's not. But that's not.
My people is not negotiable.
Again, though.
What else do you need me to say?
Wait, listen. Part of this debate, and I agree with you. I don't like when journalists say, "Well, I asked the questions." Yeah, I agree with that.
Kind of bothers
why?
Me,
yeah. Why shy away from the answer? It's part of the debate. It's part of the debate because I just need a simple yes or no to prove my overall.
Is the future of your identity negotiable?
Well, hold on one second. Then own it. Just say yes. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but then own it. Say, yes, I, Richard Spencer, would kill in order to remove people.
The future of my people is non-negotiable.
If you considered the future, fine. You use that phrase.
You're trying to get some.
No, I'm not trying to get. I'm not trying to get anything.
Is the future
I'm not trying
of your identity negotiable? Would you fight for America if it were under threat?
I define threats differently from you. That's what I'm trying to get at. You and I see threats as different. I don't see.
That might be true.
So I mean, it's like
if your identity were under threat.
Well, hold on 1 second. We're speaking English, but the semantics are like two ships in the night. You are claiming a threat is that within the discussion we had, the debate that we're having, I am literally trying to find out what you would do if you had your own country, which is what you want. And I'm literally trying to find out what you would do if people who are not white would not leave your territory. If you view that to be a threat, if you view that to be something of an existential dilemma and threat, if they would not leave, then how do you address that existential threat?
Non-white people in our territory is not necessarily an existential threat. Whites had general control, in many ways positive control, over the country for centuries, despite the fact that there were a large percentage of just the human population were slaves or Negro, former slaves. There is the Native American or Indian question.
The Trail of Tears is an example. The Trail of Tears from Oklahoma to Georgia, they were forced at gunpoint. So, from Georgia to Oklahoma. So the Cherokee were forced.
History is a slaughter bench.
So would you then, if a law was passed in your country stating that, okay, you guys got to leave now, would you then forcibly remove these people if a law was passed in your legislature and you were the head of a white nation and the laws were passed that non-white people had to leave? Would you then forcibly remove these people to follow the law within your country?
This is what we have to. I'm just simply. I'm not going to give you a gotcha. Like,
why is that a gotcha? It's your philosophy.
I have basically told you everything you need to know. I have said that in the past, whenever there were paradigmatic changes, whenever political who controls, who rules, was under threat, sometimes that has changed peacefully. Many times it is not. And the second thing is that the future of my people is non-negotiable, and I'm willing to fight for it. I don't know what else you possibly need.
But it's not.
Besides that, you want to get me to say, "Oh yeah, we're gonna be really evil and terrible." No, this can be absolutely done peacefully. And secondly, as I've just said, there could be some other races within an ethno-state, but the fact is who the core people are, who sets the agenda, who creates politics, who creates foreign policy, etc. Now, this is the key thing when you think about, when we want to talk about violence, political violence, we want to talk about it theoretically. It's a very important question. The state is able to engage in violence so long as it has legitimacy. And so the state can arrest you. It could arrest you for a crime. It could conceivably arrest you if you don't pay parking tickets. The state can go to war in the sense that the United States has killed and unjustly and stupidly, in my mind at least, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people in the 20th century and all of these foreign wars and so on. And one of the reasons that it can do these things is not just power. Power is very important, but because it has legitimacy, people actually, in a kind of theological way, you could say, as Carl Schmitt talked about, or in a belief system, they believe that America is legitimate, that it is true, and that it is good. And when the state has that power, it is able to engage in violent actions. But only really the state can do it. I can't do that. I don't want to do it, to be honest. But I cannot go out and shoot people in the street and be like, I'm a government, so it's legal. No.
So all I'm saying, so it's obvious
sovereignty, and it has legitimacy. It can engage in that. The one thing about, so in terms of political change, whenever something an entity loses legitimacy, that's when you have this kind of, often bloody, not always, but challenge for power.
So
And
in
yes,
a
that can get
state,
messy. Sure.
so in a legit, so it's obvious that you will not answer yes or no regarding this simple question. In a state that you deem legitimate, you are not willing to
Well,
answer
okay,
whether.
let me ask you.
Hold on, let me finish my question. You
Why
are
don't
not
you
willing to
shame
answer.
me,
You
and
are
why
not
don't
willing
you
to
answer
answer
it?
whether you
Would
would use
you
force. Well, hold on.
fight?
You would not. You are not willing to answer whether you would use force to remove, if your legislature or if laws were passed within your state, and it's legitimate laws and it's a legitimate state run by you. You would not. You will not answer whether you would use force to remove people if your state
Do you want me
deemed
to
that they should be removed.
just keep repeating myself, because this is like the future of my people is
You
non-negotiable.
keep
Like,
saying that. I'm
what
not talking about the future of your people. I'm talking about a law
what
that was
more do
made in
you
your
need?
country.
Would you fight and die and maybe kill
Are you
for
trying to
the
say in a
maintenance of
rhetorical way,
American
yes?
identity?
Are you
Would
trying to say
you?
in a
Why don't you
rhetorical?
shame me? Why don't you answer it yes or no, and I'll
Why
just
would
be
it be
ashamed?
shamed? I'm not.
Would
I'm not
you
asking.
fight or
I'm not.
die
I
to
am not
maintain?
stating. But I am not stating. My vantage point is that we should not have a country
What if
separate
China
from our own.
invaded the United
But my
States?
vantage point is I like America the way it is.
What
Your
if China
vantage point,
invaded it?
huh?
What if China invaded
My
our
va- but my
Pacific
vantage point.
seashore? Would
My
you fight and
vantage.
die for your
My,
identity?
my
Would
vantage
you?
point. My
Would you?
vantage point is that I like the country the way it is. Your vantage point is
Great.
obviously you do not like the country the way it is. You
I think
want a different
I
country.
like a tremendous amount of things about America, but
Okay,
yes, I think it is headed in a terrible direction, no question. And
but you would
it's
not. I
actually
understand. So
headed there fast. We are well on our
oh,
way
fine. So
to dissolution.
this is not a gotcha. This is simply an
Would
extension.
you do it? I'm going to give you a gotcha. If China invaded the Pacific seashore, would you fight, die, and kill to protect American identity?
Are you saying then that you would fight, die, and kill to kick people out of your theoretical
Look,
state?
let me answer this, because I think we need to move on, because I think I'm obviously not going to answer this in the way that it will satisfy you. So I think we should just move on. But
Okay.
in the
Well,
sense
no.
of
Listen.
what
Listen.
is possible
I think
in
that
terms of what is possible in terms of re-immigration, as many have called it. Re-immigration is very possible. In terms of illegal immigrants, that's easy. I think actually you could easily get a majority in the sense that they need to go home. Now, in terms of recent immigrants who don't really have roots, if we could create a situation in terms of paying them or even establishing something for them to go back to, I agree. Just simply kicking them away is not going to cut it. Now, in terms of the African American question, could we actually help them create a nation state? This is in the future. Could we
yeah, but
help them create a ethno state
there is
for themselves?
there is no
And
question.
actually, I would be absolutely supportive. This could be done entirely peaceful, and I would be absolutely in support of that.
But
I think
there is no African American question.
What?
There is no
They're
black people
just
don't want to.
Americans. You're
Black
just
people want to
engaging
live.
in conservative talking points, which were formerly liberal talking points,
Well,
by the
no,
way. I don't see race. I
the
just see an
culmination.
American.
No, the
Give me a
culmination of this.
break. It's a slogan. It's not a
I
real
think
thing.
we've reached a point. I guess we're probably going to end the debate in a couple of minutes, only because, and I do appreciate the time you spent, discussing, your philosophy and my vantage point. I believe is established by your inability to say, yes, I would kill people who are not white if they did not abide by the law and leave the country. And if they fought back and said, no, I'm staying, I would then fight them and kill them to kick them out of my white nation. You cannot say that, but that's exactly what you've stated in a rhetorical manner. So I guess that we've ended. I mean, there's no more to debate. Your vision of a state, you've stated in many, many different ways that you would fight and die.
Do you think America, that throughout American history, that things have gotten messy? There have been enemies that so on. Do you think that has occurred?
What was the question?
Throughout American history, America has had enemies, both external and internal. And do you think that there was actually some violence done in order to protect this state, that the state engaged in violence, sometimes a
But
civil
see, but
war.
the thing is, I'm not the one who is advocating the ideology. You are. You are the one who is refusing to say, yeah, I would use violence to ensure that my state exists. You can't state that outright. So you then explain,
because
well,
we're not talking about anything that is, if you ask me simple questions like, are you about to engage in violence? Do you think that, attacking the US government in a full frontal assault, violent military assault, is a good idea? I can, i.e. today or tomorrow, in the foreseeable future, I can answer that really easily. No, that is it's immoral, it's counterproductive, and so on. What I am talking about, because we're talking about hypotheticals, it's speculative inherently, and to just I'm not going to answer a hypothetical in that sense. What I have said is very, very clear, and that is that the future of my people is non-negotiable. And also, when there are these paradigmatic changes, that there are often battles for power. This is based on an assumption which you don't seem to agree with, but I think I'm reading into it. I think you kind of do, maybe in your heart. And that is the trajectory of this country is towards fragmentation.
I disagree with that. I really disagree with that.
Mutual hostility, and it is breaking down on ethnic and, to a lesser degree, class lines.
I disagree with that's not my vantage point. But I'm not going to say, well, we don't have to get into a whole debate. That's your vantage point, and that's of course the foundation upon which your ideology is founded upon. But I disagree with that. But you know what? I think that I want to thank you for taking this time. It's we've been debating for an hour and a half, and Richard, I want to thank you for taking the time to speak with me, and I want to thank everyone for watching, and have a great day. Thank you so much for the discussion.
Yes, thank you for the respectful discussion. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Richard.
Mm-hmm.